guys, and welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be a bit different. I am going to be talking about my biological father and how he died. Very morbid, I know, and I've been contemplating posting this for a very long time, like even talking about it, but I feel like this video could help some people if they're going through something similar like this, like whether it's losing a parent or a loved one that, you know, they were very close with or anything like that, or just to help someone that you know is struggling. On September 3rd of this year was the 8th year anniversary of my father's death. My father died on September 3rd, 2013, and I was 19 years old. Just want to give you guys a bit of a background story first about my father and our relationship. I had my father in my life. I was born in '94. So when I was born, my parents were together, but they were never married. They were engaged, but they were never married. And I think when I was like maybe a year old or something, they decided to separate, split up. And my dad would see me on weekends, or when my mom went to work and he was off from work, he would come and pick me up and he would spend the day with me, and I'll spend overnights with him. November of '98, I remember this, I was 4.5. My father decided that he did not want to be part of my life for various reasons, which I later found out once I reconnected with him, which I'm not going to talk about because that's just a little bit personal. I'm not going to talk about somebody else's reasoning for not wanting to see me. From '98 to 2012, to November of 2012, my father wasn't in my life. It was just me, my grandmother, and my grandfather, my maternal grandparents. So it was just us four. So I pretty much lived with my mom and my grandparents most of my life. And when I was 14, they decided to move back to England. If you guys did not know this, I'm from England. That's where my whole family is from, except for my grandfather. My grandfather's from Madras, India. But yeah, that's where I was born. That's where my parents were born. You know, that's where we're from. It was just my mom and I mainly throughout my high school years. And my mom always said to me, like, once I was like maybe like turned like 15, I started asking questions about my dad, and my mom would tell me, when you're 18, then you can reconnect with him, because I always felt like a piece of me was missing. It was not, you know, it was just like there's like a whole nother person out there that made me, and I don't know what he's like. I don't know. I barely knew what he looked like either. And also my personality was very different from my mother's when I was a kid. I am very stubborn. The most stubborn person you would ever meet. I still am to this day. And I know my mom is stubborn, but once I met my father, I knew where I got that from. And I have a bit of an attitude problem. My mom always said when I was a teenager, when you turn 18, we can go and you can go and look and find him and look up things about him, see where he lives. And she says, you're not going alone, I'm going with you. Even though you're 18, I want to be there with you. I was like, okay. So June 2012, I graduated high school, and in September of 2012, I went back to England for the first time in a couple of years, and I spent about 2 months there. So for the last 2 to 3 weeks of the trip, my mom came out to England, and that's when we decided to like research my father. However, my mom did know some things about him and did not want to tell me. So when we were about to do the research, she sat me down with my grandparents. My mom said, listen, I know where he has been the entire time, and also he is not what you think he looks like. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, your father had his left leg amputated. I was like, okay. And she goes, Mariah, like, he has a drinking problem, and he's living in an assisted living rehab facility down the street. It's like, what? She goes, yeah, you can still go, he can still go out, he can still drive, because it was only his left leg, so he was able to drive. So she goes, you may have seen him around when you've been out shopping. You may have not, but I'm gonna let you know that this is what you're gonna see. And I was like, okay. I'm like, honestly, Mom, I don't care. I just want the answers to my questions that I have. And I had a lot of questions. I was talking about, I wanted to ask him why he decided not to see him anymore, why he never reached out to me, and you know, just like all of these questions that I think any child would have if a parent decide to like leave them. Like if someone's suffering from abandonment issues like I did, anybody would have those types of questions and have lots of them and want answers. And I said, Mom, honestly, I don't expect a relationship out of him. I just want the answers to my questions and then just see where it goes from there. My mom's like, how do you want to break the ice? I'm like, you know what? Since you know where he lives, I want to write a letter first. I think writing a letter is better than trying to find his phone number and call him. She goes, okay, that's fair. So I wrote him a long letter, and I actually have it somewhere because I do have some of my father's belongings. I do have the letter, I just don't know where it is at the moment. I think it's in my glove compartment of my car. Sorry, my nose is a little runny. I'm not crying. So I wrote the letter and we dropped it off at the assisted living rehab facility. And I said to the woman that was in the front, I said, I know this may be a bit weird and a bit random, but I am so-and-so's daughter. I'm not gonna say his name, by the way. I said, I'm so-and-so's daughter. You may have never heard of me before. I'm sure you haven't, but I'm his biological child, and I know that he's been living here, and I haven't talked to him in 14 years, and I just would really appreciate if you just gave him this letter if you can. She said, okay, no problem. Like, yeah, like I'll give him the letter, no problem. I remember in the letter I wrote down my cell phone number for England. I have 2 cell phones. I have my iPhone that I have here, and I have a Samsung in England that I use when I'm over there. So I said, this is my number for here. This is my cell phone number. And she goes, okay. So I wrote down my cell phone number in the letter, and the woman took the letter and all that stuff. It pretty much just said, hey, I know this might seem weird, strange, random, but I just wanted to see if you wanted, you know, to get together and have a chat, you know, since I'm 18 now, and I do have a lot of questions that need to be answered. So here's my phone number, give me a call, and if you don't, I completely understand. I know this is going to be shocking for you. So the next morning after I dropped off the letter, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I was like, okay, and I thought it was him, but I was so nervous that I threw the phone at my mom and she answered it. And then he recognized it was her and he goes, where is Mariah? And she said, she's right here. She's just like shocked and a little nervous that you would actually respond. He goes, well, I am. Oh, sorry, my foot's like falling asleep. My mom hands the phone back to me and he says, hi, this is, you know, your father. I just received your letter and thank you for reaching out. I would love to get together and have a conversation with you. If you want to come over to my place tomorrow, you are more than welcome to. Like, just let me know what time is best for you. I'm gonna be home all day. It's like, great. So we decided to meet up at his house the following day, and I forgot what time it was. It was like sometime in the afternoon. And I did tell him that my mother would be joining us, and he was like, that's fine, like, no problem. My mom and I, we go back to the front and we see the same person that we dropped off the letter to. And she was like, oh my God, so he reached out to you? I'm like, yeah. He goes, and I go, yeah. She goes, yeah, I gave him the note the morning after you dropped it off. And I said, read this when you get a minute, it's very important. She goes, I'm happy that he called. I'm like, yeah, he's actually expecting me right now. And she goes, okay, I'll call him. So she calls his room and he comes out in his wheelchair. Comes out in his wheelchair. Is so cute. He had a big smile on his face and he opened his arms and my mom and I hugged him. We all hugged each other and it was just such a beautiful moment. So he brings us back to his room, apartment situation, and he offered us a drink. I took like water because I was so nervous. We sat down and we had a chat. I had all my questions answered and it was great. And he was like, I would really love to get to know you more. I was like, oh, really? Like, that's cool. I really wasn't expecting that. He goes, no, I think it would be good for us. It would be like a healing thing for both of us. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. And my mom was very happy about that. Like, my parents had a great relationship from the point that we reconnected to the moment that he passed. They all had a great relationship, like a great co-parenting relationship, even though I was 18, but it was great. I would hang out with him after the meeting. I would meet up with him almost every day until I had to go back to New York. So I told him I had to go back to New York, and like I gave him my cell phone number for over here, and he called me and we talked almost every day. and it was great. And then that following, I actually went back. So I left England in November 2012, and I actually went back in December 2012 for a week, just because my mother's brother, my uncle, was going over to England for Christmas. He lives in Germany with my cousins, so he's like, oh, I'm gonna go see your grandparents, do you want to come? Do you want to fly out and I'll pay for your flight? And I was like, okay, great. So I went back there, and me and him had our own like little Christmas thing. It was Christmas Eve, the day before Christmas Eve, and we had like a little Christmas. It was awesome. And then that following summer, I went back there for a couple of months, and him and I, we just, you know, we're hanging out almost every day. He actually got a new apartment, so I was helping him pick out furniture and stuff. It was so great. He really wanted my opinion. I was so happy that he wanted me to be included in this. And he called me for my birthday. He called me at 5 o'clock in the morning. Listen, England is 5 hours ahead, and he called me at 5 a.m. and I was like, what the hell? Like, why are you calling me at 5? He goes, I don't know, it's your birthday. He goes, I don't know, it's your birthday. And I'm like, okay. And it was such an amazing feeling that he called me on my birthday. To be honest, when I was growing up, I never thought that I would ever get that. So that was very special. And then after summer, I go back to New York, and I start my second semester of college. I started the fall semester of 2013, because I started college in the spring of 2012. No, the spring of 2013 I started school, so in the fall of 2013, that's when my second semester started. And I would call him, you know, just to let him know how my day was. And I kept calling, and the phone would ring and it would go to voicemail, and if that happens, he normally calls me back. And I thought, wow, this is weird. And I'm like, why isn't he answering? And I kept calling every day, and it just wasn't working. And I was in the car with my mom, and we were driving, and I'm like, he's still not answering his phone. I think he's dead. She goes, no, because you would have found out already. I'm like, no, I think he's dead. I wouldn't say I'm a medium or a psychic, but if someone dies that I'm really close with, I get this weird feeling in my gut, and it never passes me until I get confirmation. I don't tell anybody that I have these feelings unless it's very serious. But yeah, I had this feeling that my dad was dead. My mom's like, no, don't be stupid. We were actually on our way to pick up my grandmother, because my grandmother was coming to New York to visit. And the following morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call from an unknown number over there. And I'm like, what? I'm like, is this my dad's home number? Like, what's going on? Like why is somebody calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning? So I'm thinking it's him. I'm like, oh, I'll just, you know, he's probably just getting back to me. It's probably just a new number of his. I'm gonna go to sleep. Next thing I know, I hear the tone that someone left a voicemail. And at this point, the phone wakes both of my grandmother and I up. And I go to my grandmother. I'm like, should I check that? She goes, yeah, check that. And I'm like, okay. And I hear the voicemail, and it was this woman that was like the landlord at the new apartment that my father was living in. And she says, hi, Miss Francis, I wanted to talk to you. This is a phone call regarding your father. If you can just give me a call back at this number, I would just want to chat with you. And I'm like, what? And in my heart, I already knew. So I was like, okay, this is the phone call. And so I call her back, and I talk to her. I'm like, hi, Mrs. So-and-so, this is Miss Francis. I just received your message. I'm sorry, but it is like 3 o'clock in the morning over in New York. She goes, I know, I'm sorry, but this is very important. And I was like, and I sat down on the couch with my grandmother. My grandmother was in the living room with me at this point. And I just said to her, I'm like, he's dead, isn't he? She goes, yeah. And I'm like, I had a feeling. I was just waiting for a phone call or somebody to tell me. She goes, well, to be honest, we did not know that you existed. And I'm like, what? And I also want to point this out there. This is a week after my father passed. So my father initially passed on September 3rd. So this is a week after he's passed. And this is the reason why. She goes, so this woman goes, she goes, yeah, we did not know you existed because your father's mother, paternal grandmother, denied your existence. And I was like, what? Meanwhile, I'd never seen this woman. Like, she never really had any interest in me, and I never really had any interest in her. The only grandparents I knew were the grandparents that I had, like, I know. And that's my grandparents on my mother's side, my maternal grandparents. Like, those are the only grandparents I have. Like, I really had no interest. I really only had interested in my father, and that was it. Like, I didn't want to talk to anybody else unless they wanted to. I wasn't going to force anybody in his family to talk to me, because that didn't seem fair. So I was like, well, that's weird. And she goes, well, now that we found you, everything is going to change. And I was like, okay. She goes, we know that you have your mother's parents out here. We were just trying to call, we were calling them, and we left a message. I'm like, oh, well, my grandmother's here with me, sitting right next to me here, and my grandfather's at work. And she goes, she goes, okay, that explains them not answering, because we saw your phone number and their phone number, so we thought we would give them a call first. So that's why we called them, and then we called you. I was like, okay. So yeah, they found my records and my father's things in the apartment. They were starting to go through information to confirm that my father never had didn't have existing children. So she explained to me that's how they got my number, my information. So yeah, your father's death happened a week ago. Again, we are so sorry, but just letting you know, the police and hospital officials are not happy with your paternal grandmother because of that situation, she denied your existence. So she's gonna be in trouble for that, but you, since you are the living next of kin, you have full right to everything. And I was like, okay. She says, I will call your grandfather and tell him what's going on, and then just tell him to give me a call. And I was like, okay. So we call my grandfather at work, and my grandfather has a cell phone, but he only uses it to look at the time. I know. My grandfather only uses it to look at the time. And so we call him, and it's weird for someone to call him on his cell phone number. And he saw my number pop up, and he was like, hello. And I said, Pop, like, you need to go home. He goes, why? I said, my father's dead. They've been trying to contact you at the house. They left a message. And I said, this is the lady's number. You have to call her. And he was like, okay. And he hangs up. When I got off the phone with my grandfather, my grandmother and I woke my mother up. My mom wasn't up at the time. And I called my mom. I woke up my mom and said, Mom, I just got a phone call. Dad's actually dead. Like, can you get up? Because I need you to call people. And she was like, okay. So she got up. And for some reason, she happened to have my father's mother's contact information. I don't know how she got that, but I never had it, obviously. And so she first calls my grandfather back, telling him, like, okay, so like, what are you gonna do? He's like, I'm on my way home now. I'm gonna call her and see what's going on, like what we need to do. And then she was like, okay. She goes, well, I'm gonna have to call so-and-so. I always call my father's mother that woman, so I'm gonna just say that woman. She goes, I'm gonna call that woman and say what the hell's going on, because at this point I told my mom what happened. She calls her and she goes, oh, we've been waiting for a phone call. And she goes, really? Because you deny my daughter's existence, your granddaughter's existence, and you're still expecting a phone call? Of course she's not gonna find out. We just found out. She just got off the phone with them like 10 minutes ago. Like, what the hell? Of course we weren't gonna call you because we just found out, because that was your fault. I want to put this out there. I did not talk to my father's side of the family. The only time I talked to them was at the funeral and the burial of the ashes. That is it. That's the only time I've talked to them. She got us off the phone with, and then the woman that called me and gave me the news called me back and said, I've talked to your grandfather, and we want to ask for your permission to give him the authority to make all the funeral arrangements, everything that has to do with your father, to your grandfather, because you're over there. I know you can't get out right now. So I want to ask if I can give you your permission to give your grandfather authority for everything. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I'd rather it be my grandfather than, you know, somebody on that side of the family. I'd rather it be someone that I love and I trust. That's what happened. And in England, it's kind of weird planning funeral arrangements. I don't know if they still do this, but when my father died, they were doing this. Like, if you died on a certain day, then you were able to have a funeral on that day or that day or that day. It like depended on the day you died. It was so strange. I don't know if they still do this, but it was so strange. And it literally took us a month I'm not kidding. My father was in the morgue in a freezer for a month. So my grandfather and I started making plans. I do want to point this out there. Everybody handles grief differently, right? Some people stay home, some people go out, some people drink, some people do drugs. I went to school the morning that I found out my father died. I went to school. I went to college. I went to my classes. And it was an early day for me. I got out at like 10:30 and my classes started at 8. And then I made calls to Morgan, to Bridget, to all my other friends saying what happened. They were so supportive. Like, I cannot ask for better friends ever. Like, they were so supportive. It is incredibly difficult to make plans for a funeral in another country when you're in another country. It is hard. And also I really wasn't in the mindset. I was in shock still, and I was in shock for a very long time. I distracted myself. I was quiet. All I did was focus in school and work, and that was it. Like, I didn't do anything else. I was like numb. So all my friends, my family helped me. It was, you know, I couldn't ask for a better support system during that time. It's time for my mom and I to fly back to England. My grandmother left to go back to England a couple weeks before we did. So my mom and I flew. We were there for a week. We took a night flight, so we landed in the morning. It is like an hour and 15-minute drive from the airport to my grandparents' house. We get off the plane, my grandfather picked us up, we drove back, and then 2 hours later, a lawyer comes to the house, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I just got off a plane, I haven't slept. I don't feel good. I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm like, I know I'm here for that, but I just need a minute and I want to go to sleep. The lawyer came in and said, I'm so sorry for your loss. And then they went over like my father's assets and stuff like that, and that I'm entitled to all of the money. He has no other children and all that stuff. So we were just talking about that. And then we went to the funeral. The funeral was lovely. My grandfather, I love him. I love him so much. Like, he did everything, and I'm so thankful for that. Oh my gosh, I promised myself I wasn't gonna cry, and I am. So yeah, the funeral was beautiful, and then I ended up talking to that woman and my father's sister. Sorry guys if the lighting and the angle looks a little bit weird. My battery died, so I had to wait for it to charge because I don't have a spare, which I really should get one. We had my father's funeral, and then we went back to a pub. Just celebrated his life, really. I did have a chance to speak to that woman and his side of the family. Really not many family members, but yeah, I was able to have a chat with them. There is one moment that has stood out in my mind ever since it was said. I was out with one of my mom's friends. We were chatting, and that woman approaches me, just like chatting, like joining in our conversation, and then my mom's friend, just out of niceness, she says, doesn't she look just like him? And then that woman goes, I don't even think that she's his. And that always stuck in my mind, and it has always been bothering me. Kind of questioned my DNA and talked to my mom about it, and she goes, no, that's your father. And later found out that he was my biological father. It's just that woman is just a complete asshole. She is that asshole. So then a few days later, we hit my father's ashes and we decide to bury them. And when we started to bury them, they gave me his urn, and we were gonna sprinkle them in the ground. And I said to that woman, I said, listen, this is your son. I think it's better that you do it. I was just being nice and all that stuff. And like I said, it's supposed to be ceremonial thing, so you just like shake and pour it in, just like a little bit, just like do it ceremoniously. That woman just lifted up the urn and went, that's it. And we all looked at her like, what just happened? Like, what did you just do? Like, you have no respect for your son? And then I found out some more family history. Turns out that that woman is a functioning alcoholic, so I kind of put it together that, oh, maybe she is just drunk or whatever. That was the whole meeting my father, how I found out about his death, and his funeral arrangements. So I kind of want to talk about like a little bit after the fact. Okay, so like I said, it's been 8 years, and I was struggling for a long time. Like I said before, I like to distract myself from grief or anything else that's bothering me, so I kind of bury it internally, and I just keep burying and burying and burying it. Whether that is through work, through school, through anything really. I just don't like to confront my feelings. I'm just always been that type of person. So I really struggled for a long time, and it wasn't until like a couple of years, like maybe like 3 years ago, I started to actually heal from it, because at one point everything was happening at one time and I just couldn't handle it. And that's when I decided to take control, and I went to see my primary, and he put me on some antidepressants to help me get through the day. Like I said, I'm not a confront your feelings type of person, like, so I never saw a grief counselor. I haven't had a natural therapist since I was 13, 14 years old, so I never went to therapy for it, never saw a grief counselor, nothing. If something was just bothering me, I would just hide it, or I would actually just talk to Morgan or Bridget about it, or my mom or my grandparents. If I really want to talk about my feelings about something, I normally go to my grandmother, just because she gets me most of the time, she understands me and all that stuff. So it's just easier to talk to my grandmother. I also just want to talk about how he died. So I didn't want to bring this up until the end of the video, because how my father died is a big issue, and it's an issue for so many people, and that is addiction. My father was an alcoholic, so I can see where it comes from, like generation to generation. I can understand that, because I found out that his father was an alcoholic too, so he had both two alcoholic parents, and so it just, I guess it just went to him, and he just picked up on it. And a big cigarette smoker, like I mentioned before. He had his leg amputated when I was 16 years old, so 2 years before I met up with him, he got his leg amputated, and that was due to excess smoking and drinking. You would think that that would be like a wake-up call, and my father did try. He did explain to me that he did try, and then I saw AA badges, quit smoking badges, all of that stuff. Like, I saw all of that in his belongings after he died. Kind of gave me some reassurance that he tried. It just, with him, it just never held, and it's really sad. And so when my father died, he had a stroke 2 days prior to his passing. So my father suffered a stroke in the shower on September 1st, 2013. Like, the person running the place heard a thud in his apartment, and they came in and saw him unconscious in the shower. They called emergency, and they took my father and they put him in a local hospital, and that's where he stayed, and that was that. And he died alone. My dad died alone, and that is the saddest thing ever, to know that he died alone. If that woman had common decency to say, like, listen, he has a child, then I would have been right there with him. And that has always been eating up at me too, that he died alone and I was unaware of what was happening. And his death certificate says stroke due to excess alcohol consumption and nicotine consumption. That's how he died. I would say, if you're struggling yourself, or you are a child or a loved one that of an alcoholic, try and reach out for help, even though they probably won't want it, but always try and support them, try and help them, because you never know what's gonna happen. Look at my dad. Never give up on them. I think giving up on someone that's going through something is the worst thing you can do. If you do have a problem yourself, please just ask for help. Try and find out, try and get resources. You need a support system, and the best support system is your family. And it's sad that my father ended up having a family, but we just did not know what was happening. We did not even know what happened until a week after he passed. You know, like I said, just reach out, try and help. And if you're struggling, ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It is okay. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate this, and I'm kind of happy to share this with you guys, and I hope this helps somebody. If you've lost a parent, my condolences to you. If you also just lost a loved one, my condolences. It's sad and it sucks. They say time heals all wounds. I don't think you'll ever be you wouldn't be completely healed from it, because I'm not completely healed. As time has gone on, I've definitely noticed that pain would always be there, but it gets a little bit easier. After a while, gets easier and easier to move on. Grief, you handle your grief in your own way. Don't listen to someone say, oh, it's been this long, get over it. Listen, grief is a funny thing. You can be fine 1 minute, and then something like that, and you're off. As time goes on, it's easier to move forward. Like, you'll never completely move on, but it's easier to move forward. Anyway, guys, if you've lost a parent or you've recently lost a loved one, my condolences to you and your families. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you do have any questions, please just let me know in the comments or DM me on Instagram. My Instagram will be linked in the description bar, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.